If you guys would join me, I'd like to start with prayer this evening. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for a day where we could focus on you and ministry. Dear Lord, I pray that as the Sabbath comes, that you will bless the message. And I also pray that you bless how we are able to implement the messages that we've heard into our daily life. I ask that you be with Dr. Hart as he shares with us tonight and bless him in his ministries. In your name I pray, amen. So it's been quite a day. I just want to say I'm so appreciative for the messages that we've heard so far today. Thank you to Elder Mills, Dr. Kelly, and Pastor Kelly for sharing. And as our day is winding down, we have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Richard Hart. Dr. Hart is president of Loma Linda University Health, which is comprised of 8 schools and 6 hospitals. And he has served Loma Linda in a variety of capacities since 1972. Dr. Hart has a passion for medical missions, both locally and abroad. Locally, he's helped develop the Loma Linda University presence in San Bernardino, helping it to improve health and education in the San Bernardino community. Abroad, Dr. Hart serves as president of Adventist Health International, and Seventh-day Adventist organization helping the hospitals and clinics in developing countries. He's also served as a consult for World Health Organization. Dr. Hart holds a medical degree from Loma Linda University, a doctorate degree of public health from Johns Hopkins University, and a bachelor's degree in biology from Walla Walla University. I had the privilege of being a student under Dr. Hart at Loma Linda, both in the School of Public Health and School of Medicine. I was blessed by Dr. Hart and his wife Judy for opening their home for the Oakland Fellowship. I also have been blessed by serving in San Bernardino through Project Hope and other projects that were going on that campus. So I can say I really appreciate all of the missions that you have done and how you've influenced so many people. And I am excited to hear the message you have for us this evening.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And it's good to be with you all. As some of you may know, the Northwest is my home country. So I'm always glad to reconnect back there. Grew up in just outside of Troy, Idaho, which is about 12 miles east of Moscow. Little town of 600 people where my dad and was a country doctor along with Homer Drury, some of you may know, that ran river trips for so many years, and had a little 2-room church school with about 25 students max that we ever had, and Big Meadow Church School outside of Troy, Idaho. So, and then Upper Columbia Academy, where I met my wife Judy, in Walla Walla, and then down here and abroad and back. What I'm going to try to do this evening, and I've never quite tried to do this before, so we'll see how it works. I'm going to try to share with you the balance of Loma Linda. I can talk about a lot of things here at Loma Linda, and some of that I'm sure many of you have heard and so on. But I really want to give you some backstory at Loma Linda and the balance that we seek to pursue. Because if you think about where we are situated, on the one hand, we need to stay up with the most modern medical science, with the latest gadgets and all this sort of thing, to have a medical school and a university and to remain accredited. We have no choice, but to do that, we're going to have to do that. And the state of California instituted tighter seismic laws about 15 years ago. So we had to build a new hospital. And at the end, we'll show you a picture or two of the new hospital. So that's one end of Loma Linda. But the other end of Loma Linda is the people, the spiritual aspect, the community aspect, the global aspect, and all the things that we do to try to keep that alive as well. And that's equally important and critical to what we are all about. And so that's the journey I want to take you on this evening. And I saw somewhere, I think, that they were going to collect the questions, but in the chat room. But if you have some, we're a small enough group, raise your hand and I'll be glad to try to answer, go along or answer a chat as we go down through here, because I'm going to kind of cover a fairly broad spectrum of stuff. So let me start by sharing my screen. And I guess I'd like to ask you first, where this picture is taken from. Anybody recognize where you are? I know some of you have been down here. I don't know how long since you've been here. This is taken from the top of the Centennial Complex, which is the new academic building on the north end of the campus, where the Gentry Gym used to be years ago. So this is looking back south across the campus. The sidewalk in front of you, we call the Centennial Pathway. It goes over the top of Stewart Street, which is the cross street, goes down underneath that here. In the middle of the Centennial Pathway, over the Centennial Bridge, in the middle of Centennial Pathway is the Mission Globe. And let me talk about that first. So this is a small picture to see it all. You'll see some more a bit later. But this is a characterization of the globe. It's a water feature. Around the base of that are engraved all the Loma Linda alumni who have spent at least a cumulative period of 1 year abroad. And there's about 2,000 of our 45,000, 50,000 alumni are engraved around the base of Mission Globe. Now let me come back and start at the bottom of the pictures. This is one of the newer sculptures we just put up a couple of years ago, called the double helix, given to us by a proton patient, but you all recognize that as DNA chromosomes and kind of the magic on which we're made, that God created us and makes each of us as individuals. This is Evans Hall, where some of us studied pathology and microbiology years ago, but the main ground floor in Evans Hall is now the Center for Health Promotion, where I continue to do some clinical work. The upper floor is a physician's assistant program, and the bottom floor is research, where they're doing research on neonatal characteristics and so on, fetal development. This is the old anatomy building, Shryock building, and this now houses our School of Pharmacy. And then on the other side here is Risley Hall, which is in the old days was our physiology pharmacology building. Now it's a research building where John Zhang, one of our preeminent researchers in cardiovascular research, he currently has 4 different NIH R01 studies at the same time, which is very unusual. This is Burden Hall, which was the original church here at Loma Linda until 1965, when Paul Huback was the pastor at that time, walked the congregation across and into the new church. This is the faculty reading room, the library here, McGann Hall here, where my main office is. You can see over here some of the parking structures we've had to build. Here's P2, P3. There's just the steeple of the University Church and the old hospital, what we now call the Vintage Hospital, and the new hospital. And you can see it with the helipad up on this end of the tower. And then, of course, over here is the Hill Church, Campus Hill Church. You can't see the School of Public Health and School of Allied Health up on the hill. So let me talk about Loma Linda. Oops. Retired School of Medicine Dean was on to saying there's very few corporations that can say our mission is exactly the same as now as it was 115 years ago. And that is who we are, to continue the teaching and healing ministry of Jesus Christ, to make man whole, our motto, to make man whole, and our vision, transforming lives through education, healthcare, and research. Let me give you a little background on the to make men whole. Many of you have heard that phrase, and that's probably our most common phrase that Loma Linda is known by. And the history of that goes back to 1943, when a young pastor in London was trying to keep his young group of worshipers together during the Second World War. They were getting bombed, as you know, by Germany. And so there was a lot of struggles going on. His church got bombed and destroyed. And he decided the best way to connect with his young parishioners, his young people's group actually, was to translate the New Testament into easy to read English. Says, I need to figure out some way to help them connect. And so he would spend his days and nights down in the bombed out basement of his church in South London, translating the New Testament. And when he finished, he finally shared it with these young people there. He ran it by one of his friends by the name of C.S. Lewis, you've heard of, and checked his translation and talked about that, and started writing a book that came out in the early 1950s. He started having Bible conferences and wrote a book that he titled Making Men Whole. And in his study of the scriptures, he says that's a key principle. How do we make men whole? His name, some of you will recognize it, is J.B. Phillips, and came out with a J.B. Phillips translation of the New Testament in the early 1950s. Well, a continent away at Loma Linda was coming upon its 50th anniversary. It's scheduled in 1955. And so the committee here decided we need a motto. We had no motto for Loma Linda, we need a motto. And so they were casting about. They asked one of the religion faculty, a fellow named Dr. Frank Moran, to chair a committee. That's what we do when we have problems, to chair a committee and come up with a motto for Loma Linda. And they spent some time, a lot of committees, it's hard to brainstorm on committees, trying to come up with a good motto for Loma Linda. And finally, somebody gave Moran a copy of J.B. Phillips' book that had just come out, Making Men Whole. And as the committee looked at it, they said, that's it, to make man whole. And that became the motto of Loma Linda, rolled out at our 50th anniversary in 1955, and has remained our motto ever since then. And I think it exemplifies much of what we do. I mean, the whole world of wholeness now we talk about, or whole person care, that whole concept, I don't think I'm too arrogant to say that began here at Loma Linda with Will Alexander and all the others. Now, a lot of people talk about to make man whole. Secular organizations talk about wholeness and whole person care. But that original terminology came from J.B. Phillips' book, adopted at Loma Linda in 1955 as our motto. I want to walk you through now some of the sculptures on campus. And many of you may not know all these sculptures. So this is one of our newer ones. We call this Come Unto Me. And it's a picture of Christ sitting on a bench with a child and a puppy and patients and those being healed and children coming to him. This was put up about 6 or 7 years ago. We've just recently moved it. This is by the entrance to the old, what we call the Vintage Hospital now. We've just moved the entire sculpture over, not very far, probably not more than 200 feet, over to beside the entrance of the new hospital, so it can continue to bless people as they come in. And one of the most enjoyable parts about this sculpture in my mind is if you look carefully, if you walk up, it's hard to see in the picture, Jesus' hand right there is worn down to shiny, smooth grass from everybody coming up and wanting to hold Jesus' hand. And many times when I've walked in the hospital, I'll see a family out here with a child sitting on his lap, taking pictures, or sitting on the bench beside them, taking pictures, as people try to capture the beauty of to make man whole with this sculpture of Christ. The original sculpture on the campus is the Good Samaritan. Many of you will recognize this with the old hospital in the background.
Oh, what's your mother doing?
What you may not know is that this sculpture was first put up about 40 years ago now, but under some controversy. It was suggested by the chair of our anesthesia department, Dr. Bernard Brandstater, and one of our alumni from the Northwest, gentlemen may know him, Ruben Matiko, just recently passed away, lived up in Victoria, BC, agreed to fund it. But they had a struggle with our board because the question came up, is a sculpture, what is the difference between a sculpture and an idol? Is Loma Linda putting up idols on their campus? Should we be doing that? And you go back and look at the board minutes, there was quite a tussle back and forth on the board before they finally decided, well, let's go ahead and put this up. And this, of course, became the iconic landmark of Loma Linda in many, many ways. The backstory of this was originally sculptured in beautiful light sandstone and by a fellow named Alan Collins. Alan actually was married to a Loma Linda, a Walla Walla graduate, Nikki, and made this whole sculpture in sandstone. It was up for about 2 years, and we came out one morning and he had crafted this, the Good Samaritan, as an African-American man, right there, holding the Good Samaritan, holding the fellow that had been beaten. And about 2 years after it was put up in sandstone, somebody came along and broke his head off. And just with apparently a big 2x4 or something, whacked it and broke the head off. But he came out in the morning, there was laying the head beside the sculpture. So when we talk about race relations, this went clear back to some time ago. We decided to recast it in bronze, which we did, and it's there today. And is, I think, a living example of what Loma Linda is all about. And you think about it with the rabbi, the teacher, all turning their backs, moving away, while the stranger from a different tribe, a different culture, stopped and helped the man. Another newer sculpture we put up recently is titled, "This is the Very Place." And this is a sculpture of Ellen White and Willie White in the wagon talking with John Burden. And this story goes back to 1905, when Ellen White, as you know, had been encouraging the church to find a place in Southern California to start a training ground, and was asking John Burden to go out and find some place, and he looked at a variety of places. He had still helped to start Paradise Valley Hospital down in San Diego, and finally came across Loma Linda. It had been built as a resort, had gone bankrupt, had been sold. The next group of guys tried to make it go, had gone bankrupt again. They changed the name of the place from Mound City, that had been called, to Loma Linda, trying to make it more attractive, and put it back on the market for $150,000. Well, John Burden found this place and started writing to Ellen White, who was up in Elmshaven then in Central California. And she says, yes, please go ahead and buy that. Do everything you can to secure the money. At the same time, John Burden got a telegram from the conference president, George Beeson, saying he was back in Washington for meetings at the general conference. And he says, absolutely do not buy anything. We're already too far in debt. Do not make any bid on any land. And John Burden was caught between the two forces. Does he follow his church administrators, or does he follow Ellen White? And Ellen White insisted, please go ahead. He went down and borrowed $1,000 of his own money, put it down. And I won't go through all the stories on this, but he borrowed money here and there. Several of them miraculous things. One of the stories, two stories that are fascinating to me. He and another fellow had heard there was an Adventist farmer down on the coast that had sold a piece of land, and perhaps he would be willing to donate it. And they were out of money. They had to find something. So they took the train down there and took the train all the way out to this guy's place. It went by his place, and he wasn't home. And they were very discouraged. So they walked all the way back to the train station, several miles, only to see the last train leave. They had missed it. So they said, well, we've missed the train anyway. We might as well walk back out to his house again and see if he's home. So they went back out, and he was there and says, yes, I've got $2,700 from the land I've sold. I've been praying to God. What should I do with it? It's yours. And they took that to help complete the initial down payment. And then 2 months later, they had to make another $5,000 payment. And the group was meeting down in Los Angeles. They didn't have the money. Nobody had the money. They were ready to give up on the thing. And there was a lot of negative feelings. We've wasted the money we've put down so far. And they were meeting in an upstairs room. And as they met, everybody was kind of saying, this is crazy. We shouldn't have done it. We wasted our money. And one of the old fellows there said, let's wait for the mailman. And so they prayed and waited for the mailman. And pretty soon they heard steps coming, a man coming up the steps. The mailman was coming. He brought the mail. In the mail was a letter, a certified letter with a cashier's check from a lady on the East Coast that had been mailed 2 weeks before for $5,000, exactly the amount they needed. And they were able to make that payment. And with that faith and courage, they moved on. Well, it was a few months after that, Ellen White made her first visit to Loma Linda. And she arrived by train into the little station by Loma Linda called Bryn Mawr. And got out. John Burden met him in the wagon and brought him up to, and this is up on the hill, up behind the cottages, up where we think approximately where they met. And she turned to Willie White and says, Willie, I've been here before. And he says, no, mother, you've never been here. She said, well, then this is the very place God showed me in vision 4 years ago. The pepper trees, all the setting and so on. This is the very place God showed me. And so that began that first year of Loma Linda. And if anybody down here, I would urge you outside by the library is what we call the Founders Plaza, where we have engraved in granite the history of that first year of Loma Linda, some miraculous sort of steps that were taken to secure Loma Linda. Two more sculptures. One we put up about 7 or 8 years ago. We entitled "Who Touched Me?" And this is down by the Centennial Complex, if you've seen that. This is, of course, the story of the woman touching the hem of Christ's garment. This one was also done by Alan Collins. The other one, the "Come Unto Me" and Ellen White, were done by Victor Issa, some of you may know. And the question when we made this sculpture was, how do you show a crowd? You can't make 50 sculptures all around. So if you look at the base of this, you can see foot marks. And so we literally got a whole group of people, families, children, and went walking down the sidewalk, suddenly stopped as if someone had touched the hem of Christ's garment. Christ stopped, the Bible says, and asked, "Who touched me?" And we traced those footsteps exactly where they were, and then translated them over into the cement pad that this sculpture sit on. So "Who Touched Me?" also funded by Ruben Matico, not too long before he passed away. And then our newest one is just in front of the School of Nursing, also by Victor Issa, that was just put up about a year ago. This is a nurse in the 1950s era with a boy and a wheelchair with a broken leg, with Christ holding a lamp. And they titled this one "Be His Light," showing the way Christ leads. If I can go back to "Who Touched Me," I mean, this is such a poignant example, we think, for our students in Loma Linda, saying, real healing comes from God. So we may learn all sorts of anatomy and physiology and pharmacology and be able to do all sorts of wondrous things, but healing really comes from God. And we want everybody to always remember that. So this is back to the Who Come Unto Me statue once again. So let me talk a little bit about Loma Linda and its educational programs. As was mentioned, there are 8 schools at Loma Linda. This is looking across the main campus quadrangle. You can actually, through here, you can also see the mission globe right there with the Alumni Hall for Basic Sciences in the background. This is Evans Hall over here, Burden Hall over here. There are 8 schools in the university: the School of Allied Health Professions, which is our largest school by numbers of students, based up at Nickel Hall. Nickel Hall is named after Francis Nickel, who was one of the real champions of health promotion in the church, editor of the Review for many, many years. And so Nickel Hall the old hospital was named after him when the hospital moved. And it houses both the School of Allied Health Professions and the School of Public Health. The School of Behavioral Health has its programs down mainly in Griggs Hall, but also in several other buildings on campus. Their main programs are social work, psychology, and marriage and family therapy. The School of Dentistry, you know this building, and we're just getting ready to expand that some because they're growing out of their space. The School of Medicine, medicine offices on this side of the hospital. This is the research facility of cancer research over on this side. The School of Nursing, and you can see the sculpture of Be His Light in front. School of Nursing is actually our oldest school, started in 1905. What's intriguing about Loma Linda's history, from the very beginning, it was scheduled to send people abroad. So out of the very first nursing class, began in 05, finished in 07, 2 of the 7 members of that class went as missionaries, both of them to South America at that time. The School of Medicine started in 1909, class graduated in 1914, and 4 of that class of 9 went internationally. Back then, the mission fields were China, the Philippines, and South America, and India. And that's where they went. That's all changed now. There's different areas we go to. The School of Pharmacy, and here you can see the mission globe. You can see the names engraved around the base here and the water feature. This is in Shryock Hall, the old anatomy building where the School of Pharmacy is located. And this is one of our newest schools. I've been going for about 10 years now. One of the interesting challenges we've had with pharmacy is we had trouble convincing Adventist students to take pharmacy. It's not something that our churches talk much about. And so it's taken quite a few years to build up some momentum and convince everybody that is a good profession and worth getting into. The School of Public Health, and many of you are acquainted with it, with master's and doctoral level programs in a number of different areas. They just started and actually modified a doctoral program they've had for many years, a Doctor of Public Health and Nutrition. They recently renamed it a doctor of public health in plant-based nutrition. No, it was a doctor in vegetarian. It's now plant-based nutrition, kind of more reflecting where we are. And finally, the School of Religion in Centennial Complex. They house mainly the third floor up here in the School of Religion. This is the enrollment at Loma Linda by numbers. So you can see Allied Health is our biggest school by numbers of students. So they have a number of bachelor's, master's, and doctoral programs. Their biggest programs are physical therapy and occupational therapy. The PA program is growing now a lot, but they also have a lot of other rad tech, speech path, number of different disciplines that all make up the School of Allied Health Professions. School of Behavioral Health, I mentioned. School of Dentistry, both the DDS and the Dental Hygiene program. School of Medicine with both the MD. They also have a master's in pathology assistant in the School of Medicine now. And they also have the Earth and Biological Sciences with a master's degree focused on creationism and geology. And then we're just getting ready to start a new master's degree in genetic counseling, all of which will be in the School of Medicine. The School of Nursing, which is actually one of our fastest growing schools right now, there are now over 800 students in the School of Nursing, the School of Public Health, and the School of Pharmacy. Now, this looks like the School of Religion. Our 8th school is the smallest school. It is by the numbers of students in their own master's degrees in bioethics and chaplaincy programs, so on. But it's actually the largest school by the numbers of students they teach, because they teach all the rest of the students. So all these students by curriculum take courses in religion, and we follow the belief that the further you go in education does not mean you've learned all the religion you need to know. So we continue to require religion classes for medical students and dental students and pharmacy students, even as they go on into their doctoral programs, believing there's something more that they can learn in that way. Oops. I want to give you some bad news now. And this is probably the thing that keeps me up at night more than anything else. This is enrollment in Adventist higher education in North America. So you can all recognize your favorite school down here on the side. You may not recognize some of the AHU is Advent Health University in Florida. Used to be Adventist Health System, Florida. Andrews University, Berman University is what used to be Canadian University College, Kettering College, Loma Linda, La Sierra, Oakwood, PUC, Southern Adventist University, Southwestern Adventist University, Union College, Washington Adventist University, and Walla Walla. But I want to have you look at the numbers from 2012 up to 2020. And over here is the 8-year percentage change in enrollment in each of those schools. Advent Health down 32%. Andrews University down 10.7%. Berman University down 29%. Kettering down 22%. Loma Linda down 3%. La Sierra 17%. Oakwood 30%. PUC 40%. Southern Adventist down 17%. Southwestern 4, Union 13, Washington Adventist 13, and Walla Walla 10. An average of 18% drop over those 8 years. You can see the numbers down here in the bottom. What's that going to do to us? We're in trouble, folk. We're in big trouble. And when I was sitting through the executive committee of the North American Division recently, they showed church numbers here in North America. And every year, our church growth gets less and less. And if the trend continues, we're at about 1.2 million Adventists in North America. If the trend continues within another 2 years, we're at zero growth in North America. And you think of what's happening, much of the growth of the church really comes through our educational systems. And that's where we're getting hurt. We have closed 250 primary and secondary schools in North America, Adventist schools, in the last 10 years. 250 primary and secondary schools. And when those are closed, colleges suffer. So colleges are going through a real pivot. They're saying, where can we find students? And so they all are reaching out to Christian students from other denominations to survive. They're reaching out to international students. Quite a few families from China, from the Middle East who are wealthy, want to send their kids to an American college to learn English. So quite a few of our schools, even academies, are reaching out and doing that. The average number of Adventists now collectively across the system, it's about 65% Adventists. It used to be nearly 100%. We're now down to 65% Adventists. What does that mean? What should we do? That's what keeps me awake at night, because I worry both for the Adventist educational system. I worry across about Loma Linda's pipeline. I mean, this is our pipeline that feeds students on into our programs, and we're having a harder and harder time finding Adventist students. For the last probably 7 or 8 years, the collective organization, we call it ACU, Adventist Association of Adventist Colleges and Universities, have spent quite heavily marketing, trying to find Adventist kids in high schools, because that's where many of them are now, trying to let them know that there's higher education in the church and come and go into our schools. But it's increasingly hard to find them. There's a number of reasons for this. Of course, the demographics in the church are changing. Most of the church growth is taking place among new immigrants coming to the country. It usually takes 2 or 3 generations for a family to get themselves settled financially and be able to think about private education. So that's certainly been a factor. There's a much more cultural acceptance of going outside the church and going to school elsewhere. This is a graphic portrayal of this over the same period of time, so you can look at the different schools and kind of see what's happened. Many times the factor is cost. Families say, sorry, I just can't afford to do that. Of course, in the old days, you've mortgaged everything you had to try to keep your kids in school, in an Adventist school, but there's not that degree of commitment anymore among many of our church members. So you can see what's happening. That line over the last 8 years is pretty damning in almost all the schools. Vermon's not quite so bad. Kettering's not quite so bad. Loma Linda's stabilized and gone back up a bit, but look at La Sierra, look at Oakwood, look at PUC, Southern Adventist, kind of the preeminent school and undergraduate, going down. Southwestern is kind of tilted towards adult education and community certificate programs and so on, so they stabilized a bit there. Oops. Union College, Washington Adventist, Walla Walla, everything's going down. That's scary. That's scary for me as a church member. That's scary for me as an administrator at Loma Linda, trying to find where should we go. And it's something we talk a lot about. Should we start merging campuses? Should we start, what do we do? I mean, do we close some campuses? I can tell you some of them are getting very close to not being surviving. I mean, you look at PUC's numbers. I mean, they're down to around 500 or 600 students now, and it's hard to keep the campus going with that few students. So that's a big burden that some of us carry in the educational world of trying to figure out where we should go with that. Let me go back to Loma Linda, and I want to tell you a few more stories. A part of what we're doing, and part of this is well, some fascinating background. I don't know how many of you recognize this building, but in the 1960s, back when I was a medical student at Loma Linda, a group of people, including Warren Peters from the Northwest, head of our Center for Health Promotion now, and several others of us, decided we need to start free evening clinics for 2 groups mainly. The hippies, they were coming to California back then in their colored Volkswagens, and the migrant farm workers. And so we started evening clinics. We called Social Action Corps. And we would gather up sample medicines from doctors' offices and found a couple of buildings we could use in the evening, the basement of the Salvation Army Church, and another community building, and would have clinics. And SAC clinics limped on for a number of years that way. I went off to Africa and came back, and it was still limping along. Around early 1980s, we formed a Department of Preventive Medicine with a little practice group, and we agreed to take on SAC Clinic and try to keep it going because we felt it had both a mission purpose as well as an educational purpose for medical students. and so we kept it going. In the early 1900s, California hit a recession, and people were lining up to come to SAC clinics by noon for a clinic that opened that evening. And so we were getting concerned about that, said we've got to find larger space. So we started casting about, looking for buildings we could find, and couldn't find anything. We had no money, so we were trying to look for what we can find for no money. And finally, somebody suggested go to Norton Air Force Base, just 3 miles north of Loma Linda, and talk to them. They just decided to convert Norton Air Force Base to civilian use. And there was a large clinic building there, 43,000 square foot of clinic building. And we thought, oh my goodness, let's go try this, look at this thing. So we went out there. Janice Maynard Creek, it was working for me at that time, and it was still an air base. We had to get special permission, went in. There's a lady captain that was in charge of it, and walked us through that clinic. They'd already started to pack up the equipment. And I mean, we walked through that compared to the little exam room separated by sheets with no air conditioning that we had. This was heaven. Just a beautiful, that's not this building, that's the previous building. And somebody had been put a sign on, typed out a sign on most of the doors that said, due to budget reduction and base closure, the light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off. And I can remember thinking, well, maybe your light has gone off, but maybe ours has come on. And so we talked and started the process of applying for that building. It took 2 years, but in 1995, we were able to obtain that building, deeded to us by the Department of Education, the federal government, and began an expanded SAC clinic, changed the name then to Social Action Community Health System, still retained the SAC because people knew it. And now we went from 3,000 patients a year to 30,000 patients a year in that building. Could expand into dentistry and a number of other sorts of clinics there. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, we were again running out of space. Norton wasn't big enough. There was a lot more interest. We had become a federally qualified health center, which gave us a more solid financial base. And so we decided the time had come to probably build a new building. And the city offered us some land. It wasn't quite big enough. We couldn't get access to it good. So we found a parcel of land right along the freeway in downtown San Bernardino. San Bernardino at that time was the second largest bankrupt city in the country after Detroit. And they were delighted to have Loma Linda come plant a flag in San Bernardino. And so we decided to build a building down there and expand our SAC clinic. But as we talked about that, we says, you know, a clinic is not only a good place to provide healthcare, it's also a training ground. Shouldn't we do more than just have a clinic? A clinic would be good for our students, but in a bankrupt city, healthcare is essential to get out of poverty, but it's not sufficient by itself. You also got to have jobs. You got to have things you can do. Turn on the light. The sun is setting up here. And so we said, let's add a third floor onto this building and make an educational endeavor for the city. Now, I need to go back and tell you another story to lead up to this. Back in 1907, so 2 years after Loma Linda started, a lady by the name of Dr. Julia White, who no relationship to Ellen White, started doing community health programs. In fact, the Redlands newspaper in 1907 talks about Julia White having a health education meeting in the San Bernardino School District with 2,500 people present. So that's been part of Loma Linda's legacy. A few years later, a surgeon by the name of Dr. George arrived and was operating. His wife was an OBGYN, but she stayed home the first few years to take care of her kids. And then she would come in and do anesthesia for him. But as the kids got a bit older, in about 1912, she started doing OBGYN work. And at that time, one of the main inhabitants in the valley were a tribe of Indians called the Serrano Indians. And they had no health care. They had very little money. They were really lived on the edge of survival. The settlers in the valley had attempted to massacre them about 20 years before. And they escaped up into the mountains up into Big Bear to keep from being wiped out. And they did menial jobs around working on the farms, the rancherias, they called it back then, the orange groves that were in the valley. And so Dr. Lyra George agreed to be their obstetrician. And so they would send somebody in by horseback. When a woman was going into labor, she would get on her horse and ride out to deliver the baby in their hogans and the little homes that they had scattered around the valley. And she did that for quite a number of years. Finally, the Loma Linda was wealthy enough to buy a car so she could go in, and it was getting a little bit more, security was a concern. So she started taking one or two medical students with her, and they would go out in the car to wherever the Indian people lived. They had a long wire they'd hooked onto the battery and run the wire into the house. So they'd have a light for the delivery, and Lyra George would deliver babies. And this went on for quite a number of years. During that time, also, Loma Linda people started branch Sabbath schools for the Indian children. And some of them will still talk today about growing up in branch Sabbath schools offered by Loma Linda people. Well, you know the history of the Indians. They finally were able to get themselves approved as sovereign states. They moved into gambling and casinos and restaurants and other sorts of things, and some of their tribes became relatively wealthy. So when we got ready to build this building, what they call now the San Manuel tribe of the Serrano Indians, a small group of people, only about 220 people make up the entire tribe, said, we would like to give back. When we had nothing, Loma Linda took care of us. We would like to give back to your project. Well, I swallowed hard at that point. They get money from many sources, not just casinos, but part of it certainly comes from casinos. Should we be taking casino money to build a gateway college to train people in San Bernardino? And we went back and I looked at Ellen White's writings pretty hard. I says, boy, what should we be doing? And I was rather amazed how liberal Ellen White was on who she would take money from, including slaveholders, including as long as it was obtained legally, she seemed to be willing to take the money. And so we decided to go ahead and take San Manuel's money. And so that top floor, they gave us $10 million to add on to this San Bernardino campus and build the San Manuel Gateway College. And that has become a place where we do certificate level programs for high school graduates. We had a bit of a philosophical battle at Loma Linda on should Loma Linda, a high and mighty academic health science center, be teaching high school kids certificate programs. And there was quite a philosophical discussion on campus, but I'm pleased to say that some of us won out. And so now the San Manuel Gateway College picks up high school kids in 6 to 12-month certificate programs, pharmacy tech, dialysis tech, surgical tech, community health workers, medical, and so on. And it's been a wonderful addition to the campus. The whole San Bernardino campus it's kind of like San Bernardino said for years, we know you're over on the hill, Loma Linda, we appreciate coming to you when we need you, but San Bernardino campus, you've come to us. You've embedded yourself in us and are so appreciative of this. And I want to show you a quick video of one of our students from the Gateway College.
San Bernardino is 60 miles out of Los Angeles. It's considered the ghetto of Southern California because there's a lot of violence, a lot of families in poverty, a lot of homeless. Living in the borderline of San Bernardino, I see both ends. When you go to Loma Linda, it's a lot of educated people, a lot of nice houses, a lot of families that have a mom and a dad and all that. And when you go over to the other side where it's San Bernardino, it's a lot of broken families, a lot of people struggling to make an income. So being in the middle, I get to see the bad side and the good side, and it makes me want the family, the good income, the beautiful home, and that's what my inspiration is. So I get to see what I don't want to be and what I want to be. My mom, when she got pregnant with me, it wasn't a good situation. So my grandma had this hatred towards me. It was very hard growing up because I started believing what my grandma had told me, that I was stupid and that I was never gonna do anything in life. It started to just overcome, I couldn't deal with all the anger I had inside towards my grandma. So my only coping skill was self-harm because I didn't know any other way of dealing with the stuff that was happening to me. After I got admitted into the behavioral medical center, that's when I knew what my calling was. because I knew that I had to help somebody. I met a nurse, and she really showed me that even I was going through something at that moment, that there was so much things that my life could be made of, and that nurse kind of opened the doors for me for what I want to do, and I want to be a psychiatric nurse.
So it's a very unique setup here at Gateway College, where we have entry-level medical professionals like medical assistant. They're interacting then with the RNs, the residents, the attendings, as well as the medical students. So in that approach, then it's this vertical all the way from attending, resident, medical student, PA or NP student, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, nurse, LVN, MA, and MA students all interacting together. This is a time where it's not just a top-down approach to education, but it's also a bottom-up approach.
So the Gateway College students really teach me how to best serve the people of this community that this clinic serves. And they do that because they come from this community, and that's something that I can't learn from anybody else.
The residents are getting exposure, the attendings are getting exposure with the medical assistant students who are working in the clinics in order to provide that vertical integration. The horizontal integration is then the interprofessional work. So a clinical pharmacist, a dietitian, a behavioral health therapist are seeing and interacting with the patients as well as with the other learners.
The adult who comes to see you in internal medicine who's a domestic violence victim and has children at home, that places that child 6 times more likely to be a victim of child abuse.
So whether there are medical students, whether they are the MA students themselves, whether there are the attending physicians, that interprofessionalism is happening.
I'm graduating from the medical assisting program. It just feels really special to be the first class and inspire other kids and other adults. I love Gateway, and I love everybody here. I'm a medical assistant now at SAC Health System, which stands for Social Action Community Healthcare. I love my job, and giving back to my community in healthcare is amazing, because when you try to help a patient and you know what they're feeling, it's a different experience. That's why I am here, and that's why I pursue healthcare, because I want to help a little girl or somebody that doesn't feel loved, to let them know that you have a purpose in life. Don't let anybody stop you.
And I don't want to emphasize much here. There's 6 hospitals now at Loma Linda. Our main hospital we call the University Hospital, which is the Cloverleaf, the iconic tower. Right next to is the Children's Hospital. Down the road a bit is the Behavioral Medicine Center. Then our surgical hospital, which is where we do our Da Vinci robotics now. Marietta Head Hospital down across from Riverside, and the East Campus, which is the old community hospital. A little over 1,000 beds altogether in all of these. So to the left, there's the current hospital. We'll be moving out of that as a hospital on August 8th into the new hospital, but all of that, those towers will convert to outpatient care at that point in time. And the Children's Hospital down the bottom right, you can see. The upper right is our East Campus, which is our rehabilitation hospital, where neurosurgery, orthopedics, and physical medicine rehabilitation is existing. And then down below is the surgical hospital, all of our Da Vinci robots are, the Behavioral Medicine Center, and finally the lower right is the hospital down by Murrieta. So those are the 6 hospitals that make this up. And here's the new hospital. We'll be moving in August 8th. It actually does not have any more beds than we have now because so much of healthcare is moving to outpatient activity and outpatient surgery. On this side, this is a 9-story pediatric tower with dichroic glass on it, and then a 16-story adult tower connected by a common pedestal down here. You can see up here in the upper picture, the helipad sitting on the one end of that tower. This floor, the top floor of the common pedestal, there's five stories in the pedestal here. The top floor is named the San Manuel Maternity Pavilion. So after helping us with the Gateway College, they've now given us a $25 million gift towards this hospital for the maternity pavilion that is there. This is just another view of the adult tower and the children's tower. And I think you can all kind of see where this is located. So there's the School of Dentistry over here. That's the church right there. You can barely see the steeple of the church. So that's where the new hospital sits. The children's hospital is back here behind it. Research, just very quickly, there's some major research areas that we are into: genomics and epigenetics. We just started a new institute for genetics and genomics research. Perinatal world has been a big area for us: treatment of brain injury, stroke, and ischemia, proton treatment and development, health disparities in training, a huge program in health disparities, regenerative and gene therapies, nutrition, diet, and lifestyle. This is, of course, where the Adventist Health Study sits. Unfortunately, NIH has now decided that they no longer fund large prospective epidemiological studies like the Adventist Health Study. So we've had no government funding for that for the last probably 5 years now. So we're still doing research and analyzing the data, but we can't keep the cohort going without any external funding. And finally, cancer. I won't take time to talk about, we've got some very exciting new initiatives going on treatment of cancer. I want to take you globally. Also based at Loma Linda is an organization called Adventist Health International that works with about 40 Adventist hospitals around the world, helping them keep alive and going. We have 3 of those we're taking up to global campuses: Malamulo in Malawi, in Africa, Haiti, and the Shir Memorial Hospital in Nepal. And we've just added a 4th global campus at Berry Hospital in Chad in West Africa. And many Loma Linda grads still go abroad. This is Malamulo Hospital. Tim and Claire Gobble are from the Northwest. Tim, some of you probably know his dad, John Gobble, that worked there in Portland for WellSource for a number of years. Wilson Thomas, pediatrician, and his wife, she runs our little primary school out there. Casey Graybill and her husband, Aaron, just came home. They've been at Malamulo. Berry Hospital, the Netterbergs have been there for 9 years, going on 10 years. They just spent 7 months on leave, finally taking the leave, hiking the entire length of the Appalachian Trail, 2,700 miles. And they all made it, including Juno, the little one here. The entire 2,700 miles are now back out at Berry. Danae's OBGYN, Olin's an emergency medicine doctor and the administrator. Danae's specialty has become vesicovaginal fistulist. So she has quite a skill set, and many women come to her because of obstructed labor that then have as damaged urethras and end up with fistulas that she can repair. Jim and Sarah Appel. Jim now works in Liberia. Sarah Belinsky is at Berry Hospital. The Walkers have been in Botswana at Kanye Hospital, but now just moved to Guam. Versaba is just moving from Nairobi to Sierra Leone for a new dental practice in Sierra Leone. Wes Arnold and Brianna are in Lusaka Dental Clinic. Jillian Seaton, some of you may have heard her story. She was by herself in the Cooper Hospital in Liberia all during the Ebola outbreak. Got exposed several different times, got put in quarantine back home here for 21 days. As soon as she got out, she went right back again and kept on going. She's now over at Malamulo Hospital. Jonathan and Ali Thorpe. Ali's a Westermeyer from the Northwest. Jonathan, they've been at Shir Memorial Hospital in Nepal, but have just moving to Guam. So that's my story, and that's Loma Linda. And a beautiful day. And let me pause. I talk fast, but see if there's some questions that I can talk with you about. This is looking from down by the Centennial Complex, back up at the new hospital. Let me stop share and see if there are some questions that anyone wants to ask or talk about Loma Linda or anything else. My goodness. I either put you to sleep or you're.
Cindy, I'll ask a question.
Go ahead.
Doctor, my wife had breast cancer about 8 years ago, and we live here in Yakima Valley, Washington State. So they removed the lump, and then she told her cancer doctor that when he was ready to put her onto chemo, that she was going to Loma Linda for the proton therapy. And he poo-pooed it. He just said, well, you know, that's really so new that there's really not, I wouldn't go it if I were you. And we just thought, well, he's wanting to have the business right there at the cancer clinic. And so we came, and I'll tell you, it was marvelous. We just have nothing but good to say about the treatment, about the professionals, about the people we met in the waiting room. And there was a cancer doctor that we met who was a patient, I think from Colorado, who's somebody that is a colleague of his recommended to come to Loma Linda. He did the research on it, and he says, I'm recommending everybody to come to Loma Linda. I mean, it's just a really a great witness. I have a feeling with University of Washington adding a proton therapy that attitudes are going to change. I'm just curious about that part.
Yeah, no, there's about 25, I think, proton centers in the US now, and another 30 or 40 internationally. So it still bucks some of the same doctors' opinions on the experimental, and some of the insurance companies don't try to cover it, but it's pretty well recognized as a standard of care now for therapy. One of the things we started doing, and I didn't go into this, so let me just mention it briefly. There's an organization called BAMF, Bold Advanced Medical Foundation, that is starting a new therapy that's funding. It's actually some venture capitalists that are funding this, that basically takes a short-lived isotope that we produce in our cyclotron and hooks an imaging molecule to it and goes through the body, injection goes through the body and hooks onto cancer cells. So for the first time, we're imaging at the molecular level where metastases are. And before, you had a PET scan, you had whatever like this, but when you do a scan at the molecular level compared to a regular scan, you see the huge difference. So many times when you have a surgical failure or some sort of failure, it's because there's little mini metastases you never knew were there because they didn't show up on the scan. So this will now identify them at the cellular level. Then what they do is take the same ion and hook a little radioactive particle to it, and it goes hooked onto the same cancer wherever it is, all the metastases, and treats it throughout the body. And they're getting some incredible results with this. They started doing it in Germany. There's 2 hospitals in Germany that are now doing it. And they're starting one at Michigan State and one at Loma Linda. And so we hope that probably by the first of the year, we will have, it's called theranostics. So that's a new word. That's a new word combining therapy and diagnostics. So the therapy, the diagnostics being the ion identifies the tumor, and then the therapy, of course, being it attacks it with the radioactive particle. So that's it. It kind of builds off proton. Obviously, if proton is only a primary, proton is a great way to treat it or wherever. But if there's metastases, multiple metastases, well, this will be another avenue to tackle it. So that's one of the things we're working on now. But proton stays active. We're up to about 20,000 patients we've seen now with proton. Most of them prostate cancer, but increasingly other things. Breast cancer, they're treating more and more. They're also treating a variety of non-cancers with this. They treat acoustic neuromas, the benign tumors of the acoustic nerve. They can zap it and go away. Arteriovenous malformations in the brain. So these are conglomerations of arteries and veins in the brain. They used to try to do surgery on to ligate them, tie them off. Very risky because there's a lot of bleeding. Now they can zap that with protons. The whole thing congeals and clots. And they don't have to do surgery at all. They can stop it that way. So they're looking for other things they can do with protons as well. So yeah, thank you, Steve, for your story.
So there's a question in the chat on how do you coordinate modern medicine with old treatments like hydrotherapy, and do you train students in hydrotherapy? There's
a variety of training in. Hydrotherapy has morphed into the physical therapy world, but including hydrotherapy. And of course, we have a very large PT program here, and there are rotations that medical students can go there and do as well. It's a different world than back then, probably in terms of using just hydrotherapy, but it's made a combined therapy with other sorts of things. There's a bit on the nutrition thing. In fact, we just did a recording yesterday. The whole emphasis on nutrition has shifted from even vegetarian nutrition to plant-based nutrition. and growing interest in vegan diets and following that. So I think much of that is Loma Linda is still the center for that, but there's many other people. I mean, people say, well, everybody's stealing your thunder. And I say, no, everybody's following, and that's great. Better luck to them. Let them all follow what the good practices. We don't need to corner this. I didn't look at some of the other. Are there other questions in the chat?
Don't most people have cancer cells? So you will have most of the population to treat.
No, I would say it differently. Everybody creates cancer cells, but their own body with good immune system attacks the cancer cells and takes care of themselves. So you don't keep the cancer cells, you have it, but they're eliminated until either a person's immune system isn't adequate and the cancer cells get a hold, or something sticks on that the immune system can't handle. So yeah, all of us have cells that decay into cancer cells, but for most of us, our own immune systems will take care of that to a large degree.
There aren't any other questions in the chat, but if anyone would like to unmute and ask a question, please feel free to do that.
This is John Kelly. I just want to say this has been a remarkable presentation. It's encouraging, and I just thank God for it. Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you, John. Good to see you again. John used to live up here in Oak Glen, where I live, back when he was a medical student, about 100 years ago, I think it was, John, wasn't it?
He might question who you're dating with that. There is a question in the chat about Loma Linda and the COVID vaccine.
Well, we've had a very active immunization program. We've converted Drayson Center, our gym, to a community vaccine center. So through much of this, we were doing around 2,000 to 2,500 vaccines a day. The demand has dropped off significantly, so we're actually closing Drayson Center at the end of May. And have started moving to what we're calling pop-up clinics. So we're going out to different communities that don't come in, out across the San Bernardino Desert. There's a lot of smaller communities that, or migrant farm worker communities, things like that. So we're putting our emphasis on trying to reach those. Yesterday, for the first time, Loma Linda did not have a COVID patient in the hospital. During the height of this, on December 30, we had 342 COVID patients in our hospitals. We got slammed and we had to shut down a lot of services, convert wards to COVID patients. We actually rotated all the surgery residents, all the anesthesia residents over to be intensive care doctors caring for COVID patients, because we were just really hit hard. But it's been gradually going down. The last ICU patient was about a week ago, and the last COVID patient was yesterday. So I'm not completely convinced it's going to stay away. We've been pushing vaccines hard, and almost all of our staff, well, I shouldn't say almost all the doctors are vaccinated, but we still have some, where about, I think 60-70% of the rest of our staff are vaccinated. The question about experimental, the Pfizer vaccine is now applying for regular status. We've been under the EUA, experimental use authorization, but all of the research coming back is so positive and so good that we're convinced they will get regular use, and they keep dropping the age in which they can give it to them. We've actually had all three vaccines we've been using here, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, and continue to have great confidence in all three of those. And I would urge all of you who haven't to get it. I mean, this is as much sense as measles or all the other things that we've done. When I worked in Africa years ago, was the last days of the smallpox. 1977, we eliminated the last smallpox case. We thought we were going to eliminate polio by 2020, 2000, but it didn't make it. Still got a few polio around and still has some measles around, but all of those could be eliminated if we get vaccination rates up. And we don't know for sure whether COVID is going to be one vaccine will do it, or whether we're going to have to go on to an annual booster like we do with flu. But yes, because it's a new vaccine, it's experimental use, but what's it been, 150 million people in the US now have received it with very rare side effects. In fact, much less even than many of our regular vaccines.